The sky burned with unnatural color the day the war began. The veteran remembers it vividly, though decades have since passed. He had stood on the edge of Earth's stratosphere, suspended in silence aboard a sleek, obsidian transport, watching the blue planet swirl beneath him. It had looked serene from that distance, delicate, almost fragile. He'd wondered, in that final moment of peace, if they truly deserved what was coming. But orders were orders, and he was a soldier bred not to question. Not yet. He was called Veruin, though that name meant little anymore. In the war's aftermath, his name had become unspoken, synonymous with fire, with shadows that swallowed entire cities. Among his own, he was once praised as a war sculptor, a tactician of unmatched efficiency. Among humans, he became a whispered myth, the red-eyed ghost. But before he became legend, he was just one of many conscripts, drilled and conditioned for obedience. His species, the K-Cherex, were built for endurance, their dermal plating resistant to chemical decay, their senses sharpened by evolution on a brutal world of volcanic storms and eternal dusk. Yet Earth challenged them in ways they had never anticipated, not just in environment but in resistance, in will. His first breath of Earth air was almost his last. The gravity pulled differently here, heavier than expected. The air clung to his skin, humid and charged. He descended in the first wave, just outside a city the humans had called Santiago. The mission had been simple: establish control over communications, disable their satellites, erase their eyes. They encountered resistance within minutes. Not trained soldiers. Civilians. Children wielding rifles far too large for their limbs. Entire families fighting as if they had nothing left to lose, because they didn't. And for the first time, something flickered beneath Veruin's steel-plated exterior. Confusion? Pity? The concept felt alien. Still, he pressed forward. The combat was short, violent, and merciless. The K-Cherex had weaponized sound and heat, disintegrating structures with pulses of focused energy. Humans retaliated with cunning. Homemade explosives, EMP bursts, poison-laced bullet. Veruin lost 2 squadmates in the first hour. Not because the humans were stronger, but because they were unpredictable. Desperate. That night, Veruin sat on the charred remnants of a church, staring into the crumbling stained glass. A human child had died beneath it earlier that day, her body shielding a crude communication device. Her final transmission looped endlessly on the static-ridden waves. "We are not afraid." He didn't sleep. Command hailed the assault as a triumph. Within days, global infrastructures fractured. Governments collapsed or vanished underground. Satellites fell like shooting stars. Earth was darkened, not by force alone, but by silence. And yet, in that silence, humanity roared. Every K-Cherex squad sent to pacify rebel regions reported losses. Unexpected ones. Entire patrols vanished in the ruins of old metro lines. Ships were swallowed by oceans without trace. Some K-Cherex spoke of human witchcraft, of psionic pulses or nanite plagues. Veruin knew better. The humans had learned to fight monsters by becoming monsters themselves. Then came the campaign through the Eurasian corridor. Veruin led the 9th Conquest Division through scorched fields and broken capitals, where the air itself rebelled, heavy with ash and mourning. His unit was the most feared. They moved like ghosts, without sleep or pause, leaving nothing behind but silence and heat. But even ghosts falter. In the hollowed remains of Moscow, Veruin found something he could not process. Human prisoners left alive, unguarded, fed by unknown means. They had survived in underground vaults for weeks, maybe months, sustained by rainwater and fungi. One had offered him bread. Stale. Hard as bone. But it had been a gesture. A defiance. A mercy. He didn't take it. But he also didn't kill her. Later, when questioned by his superior, he lied. Said there were no survivors. Said they'd burned everything, as ordered. He never lied in war before that moment. Each battle after seemed to scrape away more than armor. He began recognizing faces, patterns, learning human languages, not out of curiosity but survival. Their ambushes were no longer random, they were coordinated, adapted. In the scorched ruins of Vienna, his division encountered something chilling: silence. No heat signatures, no transmissions, no movement. A trap. The humans waited beneath ice and stone, emerging only when it was too late. Out of 20 K-Cheraks for escape. Veruin, barely breathing, had dragged one of them, a newly blooded soldier with shattered optics, across 7 kilometers of irradiated terrain. The young one had begged him to leave him behind. Veruin didn't. He never explained why. And then came the encounter at the Himalayan ridge. A human sniper, a woman with frost-bitten cheeks and eyes that didn't blink, killed 3 K-Cheraks with handmade rounds before vanishing into the snow. Veruin had found one of her camps later, a cave scrawled with poetry. Names. Prayers. A sketch of a child. He burned it. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. That he would remember it. That it would make her real. The war changed shape after that. Less conquest. More survival. The K-Cheraks stopped calling Earth a target. They started calling it cursed. And through it all, Veruin endured. Not because he believed in the war, but because he didn't yet know what came after it. He watched the lines blur, the orders lose meaning. He began to wonder who the true monsters were. And worse, he feared the answer. The child's voice sometimes returned to him in moments of quiet. "We are not afraid." He began to believe her. By the time the Earth campaign reached its final phase, Veruin no longer recognized himself. His armor still bore the insignia of his people, but his thoughts were no longer theirs. His silence, once cold and calculated, had become heavy with doubt. The war wasn't won, not really. Even as K-Cheraks' fleets rained down flame from the upper atmosphere, the human spirit refused to break. In one final mission, a deep strike operation in the flooded ruins of Lagos, Veruin would make a decision that would cost him everything. But that story wasn't ready to be told yet. Not until now. And somewhere, in a crumbling archive buried beneath centuries of ash and blood, a human voice still echoes across time and memory. We are not afraid. The snow did not fall in New Alaska, it attacked. Shards of ice sliced sideways through the wind, stinging through armor seams and fogging visor lenses. Veruin trudged forward through white oblivion, pulse rifle raised, vision shifting between thermal and motion scans. Nothing. Just silence, broken only by the keening wail of the blizzard. The mission was clear. Eliminate a rogue human cell broadcasting encrypted signals from an old weather station deep in the tundra. Intel had described them as fragmented, starving, desperate. That had been a lie. Everything about Earth was a lie. The K-Cheraks squad advanced in formation, their frames built to endure extreme cold. But even they underestimated this place. The cold wasn't just environmental, it was tactical. The humans had learned to use it like a weapon. Sensor jamming. Sonic decoys buried under snowbank. Tripwires disguised as frost-stiff root. One of Veruin's soldiers, a seasoned hunter named Dresk, triggered a mine cleverly hidden beneath a pile of abandoned coat. The blast didn't kill him, but what came next did. A barrage of rifle fire. Not plasma. Lead. Crude and brutal, but aimed with surgical precision. They moved like ghosts, these humans. They fired, vanished, reappeared elsewhere. Flashes of movement in the storm. One K-Cheraks fell. Then another. Then silence again. Veruin signaled a retreat, not out of fear, but out of strategy. These weren't random survivors. They were trained. Coordinated. Someone was leading them. He intended to find out who. They camped in a cave that night, the wind howling like a grieving god outside. One of the younger soldiers asked the question no one wanted to voice. How do they fight like this? They don't have our tech. Our armor. They barely have food. Veruin didn't answer. He stared into the frost gathering on the rock wall, lost in the shape of it. It looked like a face. A woman's, perhaps. Her eyes were closed. The next morning, they returned to the station, this time in silence. No formation. No light. They became hunters instead of soldiers, mimicking the tactics they once called primitive. When they arrived, the station was empty. Not destroyed, abandoned. On the main console, a single message had been burned into the screen: "You are being studied." They never found the source of the broadcast. Only bones. The war turned after that. Not in grand battles, but in moments like these: silent retreats, empty rooms, invisible enemies. Human resistance stopped being predictable. Cities crumbled, but resistance grew stronger. The more the K-Cherok struck, the more the humans adapted. In what was left of Berlin, Veruin faced the most harrowing ambush of his entire campaign. They entered the city thinking it deserted, a graveyard of steel and soot. Instead, it was a trap layered across miles. Rooftops rigged with gravity wells. Sewer grates laced with smart explosives. The K-Cherok's forces fell into the city like prey into a labyrinth. There, he encountered them again. Soldiers painted in ash and bone, moving through the smoke like phantoms. They bore no insignia. No broadcast. Only silence and death. Veruin's translator couldn't register their language. They spoke in gestures, in flashes of light and coded breath patterns. He later learned they were called the Children of Fire. They didn't fight for countries. They didn't fight for politics. They fought for revenge. One of them, a lean figure with scorched skin and cybernetic implants, almost ended Veruin. A blade across the neck, fast and silent. If not for the sudden collapse of a support beam, he would have died there. Instead, he lay in rubble, half buried, as the human stepped back, stared down at him. There was no hatred in the human's eyes. Only recognition. As if he saw not a monster, but a mirror. The human didn't finish him. Veruin never told anyone what happened in Berlin. He limped back with half his squad gone and filed a falsified report: enemy fortified beyond sustainable assault. Recommend orbital strike. The fleet obliged. A crater now marks the place where ghosts once walked. Still, the guilt lingered. What disturbed Veruin most wasn't their tactics. It was their silence. The humans had learned not to scream anymore. Not to cry. Pain was quiet. Death was too. He began to dream in silence. No gunfire. No orders. Just frost and breathing. The War Council refused to believe his reports. They saw human weakness. He saw something else, something ancient. A defiance not built on weapons or orders, but necessity. Desperation was their strength. In the ruins of an old library near Alexandria, Veruin found evidence of how far humans were willing to go. The building was rigged to collapse, its columns hollowed and filled with chemical accelerant. When a squad entered to extract data cores, the structure folded inward like a dying beast. Screams filtered through comms. Only Veruin made it out. Among the rubble, he found a child's drawing, crude but clear. A K-Cherok's and a human shaking hands. Above them, the words, "Peace is possible," written in blood. He carried that paper in a compartment on his left arm. Never showed it to anyone. Not because he believed in its message, but because he wanted to. Back at the forward command, new orders were issued: full-scale extermination. No more containment. No more capture. Burn every human outpost. Purge the underground. A final solution. Veruin hesitated. He stood before the map of Earth, flashing red with marked targets, and felt something shift. He was tired. Not physically. His body could endure for decades more. It was his mind. The war was becoming hollow, recursive. No victories. Only survival. And in that stillness, he made a decision. The next assignment would take him deep into the African territories, into a place humans called the Fallen Flood. Command said it was a stronghold of resistance, but Veruin had begun to doubt everything Command said. He wondered what he would find there. Another ambush? More silence? Or perhaps something else entirely? He sealed the drawing of peace tighter into its compartment. And then he left. Not just for the mission, but towards something else. Something unknown. Rain fell like memory in the fallen floods. It was not water in the way Veruin remembered it. It was thick, tainted by centuries of chemical fallout and atmospheric decay. Still, it poured endlessly, a choking deluge that turned soil into sludge and buildings into rot. The remnants of once great cities lay half-submerged beneath the murk, their rooftops peeking above the surface like forgotten tombstones. Veruin moved cautiously across the broken causeway, his boots sinking with every step. He was alone now, by choice, not by circumstance. He had requested the assignment as a solo operative, citing stealth and operational efficiency. Command had granted it without question. Perhaps they were eager to see him gone. Perhaps they no longer knew what to make of a soldier who asked too many questions and won too few wars. He descended into the ruins of what had once been Lagos. The city was a ghost. Skyscrapers wilted under vines of corrosion, and what little infrastructure remained stood as jagged silhouettes against a bruised sky. But life persisted here. It always did. His objective was simple: locate and neutralize a rumored resistance nexus. Intelligence claimed the human force operated from a sunken cathedral, its spire now half swallowed by the tide. It was said to house survivors, insurgents, perhaps even children. Veruin had stopped asking why the targets were never just soldiers. He made his way through flooded alleyways and collapsed arcades, his motion sensors flickering with phantom blips, heat signatures that vanished the moment he turned. It wasn't just the environment. The air here played tricks. Sound bent. Light flickered at odd frequencies. Shadows moved when nothing cast them. He didn't feel fear. Not exactly. But he felt watched. Near what had once been a plaza, he found a mural. Hand-painted. Fresh. It depicted a kid Cherokee, tall, angular, and imposing, kneeling. Before him stood a human child, offering a flower. The art was rough, but the message was clear. Hope. Veruin reached out, touching the paint. Still wet. A sound cracked behind him. Metal on stone. He turned, weapon primed. There was a woman. Human. Mid-30s, lean with a soldier's posture. She wore patchwork armor, scavenged tech woven into her sleeves. A rifle was slung across her back, but her hands were empty. "You're not here to burn us, are you?" she asked, voice steady. Veruin said nothing. His translator kicked in, interpreting her words through tonal matching. "If you were," she continued, "you'd have done it already." "I was sent," he replied, "to end what remains here." "And what do you think remains?" He hesitated. It wasn't a trap. Her tone lacked malice. If anything, it carried exhaustion. Beneath the confidence there was something fraying. "I don't know," he said. She nodded toward the mural. "That was painted this morning. By a boy who's never seen the sun. He asked me if monsters could become friends." Veruin stared at her. "And what did you say?" "I told him monsters don't stay monsters forever." Her eyes never left his. "Do they?" He lowered his weapon. She introduced herself as Captain Elira Maine, leader of what was left of the Southern Resistance Network. Her people were starving, hunted, broken, but they were not finished. And more importantly, they were listening. "I know who you are," she said later, inside the cathedral. "You're the one they call the Red-Eyed Ghost." He didn't respond. "You spared the Vienna outpost. You refused the orbital strike in the Arctic." Her voice was quiet. "Why?" "I don't know anymore," he said. "You're looking for something," Elira said. "Not orders. Not targets. Something else." He didn't deny it. They spoke for hours. Not about peace. Not about surrender. But about exhaustion. Regret. Futility. They spoke as soldiers who had seen too much and understood too little. She told him about the underground farms powered by dying batteries, about the libraries preserved on crumbling paper, about children who learned to read by candlelight. He listened. Not with military detachment. With something closer to hunger. That night, He stood alone beneath the broken dome of the cathedral. Rain leaked through the shattered glass. The stars above were hidden, but he imagined them. Imagined what it would mean to leave this world behind, not in victory or defeat, but in choice. He had been bred for war, engineered to carry out commands without failure. But somewhere along the line, he had failed. Not in execution, but in belief. And in that failure, he had begun to see something else. Possibility. The next morning, the K-Cherok's fleet arrived in low orbit. Their sensors would detect the nexus. The human energy signatures. The presence of a rogue operative refusing to report in. They would burn the city to glass unless someone stopped them. Veruin stared at the comms beacon mounted on the cathedral roof. With a single transmission, he could signal the fleet. Feed them false data. Claim the region was already purged. By time. Or he could do nothing. Let them erase everything below. Alira watched him from the doorway, saying nothing. He raised the beacon controls. His fingers hovered. The silence was heavy. Then he made his choice. The signal burst upward, coded, masked, unmistakable. Lagos was declared barren. No life. No threats. No targets. The fleet would move on. As the beacon flickered out, Veruin turned toward Alira. "This isn't forgiveness," he said. "No," she agreed. "But it's a beginning." Outside, the rain began to ease. Veruin never expected peace to be quiet. In the weeks that followed the false signal, the skies over Lagos remained empty. No orbital strikes, no reconnaissance drones, just the heavy hush of disbelief. Alira's people continued to live in the cathedral and its surrounding ruins, waiting each day for the sky to fall. But it didn't. And slowly they started breathing again. Not freely, but enough. Veruin stayed. He dismantled the locator in his armor. Cut the satellite feed from his helmet. He became just another shadow among the ruins, another figure patched with rust and purpose. The children watched him first with fear, then with curiosity. A few weeks in, one of them left a flower on his food tray. The same kind the boy had painted on the mural. It was small, brittle, but bright. Veruin kept it. Alira didn't speak of war anymore, only of rebuilding. She mapped tunnels, repurposed ancient plumbing, rewired collapsed grids. She was a soldier, but also an architect of resilience. Veruin watched her in silence, learning how to lead in a world where victory meant survival, not destruction. And yet, beneath it all, he knew the reprieve was fragile. The K-Cherok's command would not be satisfied forever. Somewhere in the network, someone would notice. A missing report. A dead zone in surveillance. A silent operative. Eventually, someone would come to investigate. And when they did, Lagos would become fire again. It happened on the 39th day. A scout vessel breached orbit, disguised as a meteor in descent. No warning. No declaration. It landed in the southern flats, miles away, but close enough for its presence to be felt in the vibrations of the ground. Alira called a council that evening in the crypt beneath the cathedral. There were no speeches. Only strategy. Scouts mean data, Alira said. They're here to verify. Not attack, yet. Veruin nodded. They'll confirm habitation. Then send coordinates back to Fleet Command. Which means we have hours, not days. And then, someone asked. Then, Veruin said, they burn it all. Silence settled like dust. A plan formed. Not of resistance, but of delay. A decoy transmission could be sent from the ruins of Ibadan, using salvaged equipment and Veruin's authorization code. It would make Lagos appear empty while suggesting the human stronghold lay elsewhere. But someone had to go. And someone had to transmit. Alira volunteered. Veruin refused. You're too vital, he said. They need a symbol. She looked at him with tired eyes. And what are you? Expendable. She didn't argue. The journey to Ibadan was death, rain-slick, mine-riddled, watched. But Veruin moved like silence itself. He traveled under cover of electromagnetic storms, his heat signature masked with cooling agents scraped from old military stockpiles. He passed through ruins that whispered of old worlds, schools filled with fossilized books, theaters reduced to vines and dust, markets with empty stalls and walls still etched with graffiti. "We lived here once," they said. At Abaddon, he found the old satellite uplink tower collapsed but usable. The relay dish hung at an angle, its frame twisted, but the core components remained intact. He rewired the terminal using fragments from his own suit. Sparks danced. Static hissed. Then the screen came alive. He fed the fleet what it wanted: coordinates, troop estimations, pulse readings, false movement trails. He crafted a perfect illusion: the enemy was elsewhere. Lagos was dead. As the transmission uploaded, the tower began to hum. That's when the scout found him. It emerged from the trees with insectal grace, 4 limbs, glimmering armor, visor glowing like an open wound. A younger K-Cherok. Faster. Smarter. Born in the fires Veruin helped start. Recognition sparked between them. Then tension. Veruin didn't draw his weapon. He only stepped forward and said one word. "Listen." The scout hesitated. Blinked. Confused by the lack of resistance. "I was you," Veruin said. "I believed what they told me. That humans were chaos. That we were the solution." His voice was calm, heavy with meaning. "They lied. The scout's weapon didn't lower, but neither did it fire. The humans survive not out of hate," Veruin continued, "but out of hope. They build while we burn. They remember while we erase. The transmission reached 78%. They bleed for peace and we kill for orders. What does that make us?" The scout twitched, training at war with doubt. "You have a choice," Veruin said. "Just like I did." The transmission hit 100%. Veruin turned his back. If the scout wanted to kill him, it would happen now. Clean. Efficient. But it didn't. He walked away. Hours later, the fleet changed course. They moved toward Abaddon, away from Lagos. The cathedral stood. The children laughed again. And Veruin returned, not to applause, but to quiet nods. Gratitude etched in silence. Elira found him beneath the mural, hands stained with rust and rain. "You risked everything," she said. "No," he replied. "I gave it purpose." The flower the child had left him had dried, its petals curled inward like a secret. He placed it in a sealed glass vial, then tucked it into the folds of his armor. "I can't undo the past," Veruin said. "But I can help protect what might come next." Elira offered him her hand. He took it. Above them, the clouds began to thin. A single shaft of light broke through, striking the mural, illuminating the child, the monster, and the flower between them. It was not peace. But it was a beginning.